A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We are so delighted to have you on Let's Talk this afternoon. We are grateful for the privilege and opportunity to share today. We are discussing part 2 of the subject infidelity. From last time we had this discussion, which really was a while ago, the interest was so great. We did promise you part 2. We are back this afternoon, and we trust that you will enjoy and benefit from what we have to share with you. It is an important subject. We are here on Let's Talk, and on Let's Talk, we deal with very challenging and difficult subjects. We seek to provide meaningful answers so that you can be guided in your spiritual walk and in your understanding of life generally. Before we go into the discussion this afternoon, and before I introduce our guests, we want to invite you to bow with us for a word of prayer. Eternal Father and our God, we pray that you will be with us as we share with our friends. We ask that you will guide and that you will take full control and have your own way. Grant us your blessings, give us wisdom to explain the concepts, be with our guests and be with all of our viewers. May your name be glorified. This is our prayer. We ask it with thanksgiving. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, we have with us this afternoon our same 2 guests from our last program, but I did check to see that the first discussion we had on this subject of infidelity was back in December, so quite a while has lapsed since then. This afternoon, we have with us to discuss this very important subject, Pastor Ammaran Williams and Dr. Mark Braithwaite. Just as a reminder, in case you don't quite remember who our guests are, Pastor Ammaran Williams is originally from the tiny island of Braithwaite in the Grenadines. We say St. Vincent and the Grenadines so that you have a reference point. He's an ordained minister of the Seventh Adventist Church. Currently, Pastor Williams serves as the Ministerial and Family Life Director, Family Ministries Director of the Caribbean Union Conference of Seventh Adventists. He has been in ministry for just about 40 years, so he's quite a man of experience. He has worked in St. Vincent, in Dominica, in Barbados, and in the U.S. Virgin Islands. In addition to his ministerial training, he has a master's degree in developmental psychology and counseling, and is currently pursuing a doctoral degree. He delights in his family, his wife, and 3 daughters, Amel, Anjaness, and Amriel. Pastor Williams is driven by his personal philosophy. What happens to you matters to me. We are delighted to welcome Pastor Ammaran Williams, a friend of mine, to Let's Talk another time. Pastor Williams, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, and appreciate the words of welcome and introduction. And I'm very delighted to be here and to share this very important subject with you and your listening and viewing audience.
We also have Dr. Mark Braithwaite. Dr. Braithwaite was educated at the Antigua and Barbuda Seventh Adventist School, went on to the Antigua State College where he completed his A-level program. Later, having received the call to the gospel ministry, he matriculated at the Caribbean Union College, now the University of the Southern Caribbean, where he graduated with honors with a BA in theology in 1997. He then went on to complete a master's degree in pastoral ministry at the Inter-American Theological Seminary, and later on a doctoral degree, Doctor of Ministry, with emphasis in family life from Andrews University. Dr. Braithwaite has served in Montserrat and in several districts here in Antigua Barbuda. He is presently serving at the South Leeward Conference as the Ministerial Secretary and Family Life Director, Men's Ministries Director. He co-hosts the weekly radio program Marriage Encounter, and that is, of course, aired on Second Advent Radio 101.5 FM. He is married to Greene, who holds a degree in behavioral science and is a banker by profession. They have been married for 20 plus years, and God has blessed them with 2 children, Shama and Shalissa. We are delighted to have Pastor Braithwaite, who loves the Lord, loves serving with young people, and also has a passion for family life education. Dr. Braithwaite, welcome to, I almost said Marriage Encounter. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you for the introduction and welcome. And just a joy to be here again with my colleague, Pastor Ammaran Williams, and friend, and also with you, Doc, as you host the afternoon's program. We appreciate it, and just hope that, as we share this afternoon, that it will be meaningful and a blessing to our listeners.
All right, wonderful. So this afternoon, we plan to, we are going to be looking, continuing with this subject of infidelity. And someone just sent me a note to say, Pastor, the last program was not in December, it was in November. And I think they said it was November 14 to be exact. So I do have some persons checking up to make sure, we are so delighted to and appreciative of all of our viewers who join us from week to week. There are some individuals who have indicated, listen, I've never missed a program. We appreciate you and the meaningful exchanges that you have been given from time to time. Well, as indicated, we are continuing our discourse on infidelity. In our last discussion, we looked at the fact that infidelity is not just a physical occurrence. We highlighted that such an approach is dangerous, an approach where we say it's just a physical occurrence. The emotional and spiritual implications are far-reaching. We also looked at the fact that being Christian does not make one immune to the temptations of infidelity. In fact, we shared some statistics that showed that it is perhaps more popular than many would realize. 1 in 3 married men and 1 in 6 married women. And that certainly is alarming statistics. Also, in our last discussion, we began looking at some of the factors that lead to unfaithfulness. There was one in particular that we mentioned but did not go into all the details, that being pornography. We also want to spend some time this afternoon looking at fear-proofing your marriage. So we're going to jump in. Let's begin by considering the importance of having a balance, or what I would call a correct view of what marriage really is. How important is it for a married person to understand the value of commitment? That's where I want to begin this afternoon as we build on what we have shared already. So maybe I should start with Pastor Williams. How important is it, Pastor Williams, that one has a correct view of what marriage really is?
Right. Very, very important, very foundational question. And I think it forms a very good basis for our discussions this afternoon. Your marriage, number one, was God's idea. That alone should make it, very important, for us to not only be a part of, but to take it seriously. But also, the pen of inspiration goes one step further, and she talks about it, that the marriage relation is not only spiritual, but it provides somewhat of a vehicle in which, they not just a couple, but the family make it, to the kingdom. And then when you look at the emotional value of marriage, in that we all are emotional beings, we have a sense of, we have that need, to be complete. And so marriage does that. It fulfills that emotional yearning that we have to be fulfilled in every single aspect of, of life. And then, of course, related to the spiritual and the emotional, there's certain social benefits, because we all are social beings and we operate within a particular community. And, in the context of marriage, that's a very critical part of our socialization. So marriage is is very foundational. As I said, it's God's idea, and therefore it was given to us as a gift from God for our emotional and spiritual as well as social fulfillment.
Well, thank you so much, Doc. Appreciate that. Can a person commit adultery without physically having sex with someone? Dr. Braithwaite.
Hi, Doc. So, that's an interesting question because oftentimes when persons do think about adultery, they often think about the physical act. We understand that the act of sex itself, far more than just simply a physical act, is heavily emotionally involved. Psychologists will tell you about the psychology of lovemaking, and if you speak to a woman would say to you that in order for her to be able to enjoy the act of sex, she has to be in a good psychological place. That having been said, the reality of adultery is one that takes place or can take place outside of the physical act, where an individual can be so emotionally attached to somebody else that the emotions that they ought to be sharing with their spouse, they end up sharing with somebody else. And it really becomes a pathway to the physical act. So that a person spends time and energy with another individual, sharing all of the deep inner recesses of their own heart. That now forms a pathway to the physical act. So I would suggest that, yes, an individual, the Bible says that a man looks after a woman to lust after her. And that speaks to the very notion that we're sharing here, not only physically, but also from an emotional level.
So we are therefore saying that adultery is more than physical. We're saying that it is something that begins in the mind. Now, you made reference to Jesus saying, if we look at a woman to lust after her, I can imagine that there are lots of men out there saying, well, I'm in deep trouble. How do we interpret that lust? If I see a woman and I say to myself, she is a pretty woman, is that what we're talking about, or are we going further than that?
Well, I think it goes much further than that, and I think it has to because we have eyes, we may be off our guard. There may be circumstances in our minds where we are at a low moment, and so these things can happen. And when we talk about lust, it's more about committing yourself to the point where if you are given the opportunity there and then, that it would be much more than just looking. More than that, when it becomes consuming to the point where it interferes with other aspects of your life, other relationships, and mainly your spouse, as well as it takes you away from your normal functioning, and it more or less controls you rather than you being in control of your emotions. So it's not just about looking at someone and admiring them and even sometimes allowing your mind to wander. It has to do primarily with such a deep desire that if opportunity presents itself, then it becomes more than just looking.
Well, to our viewers, if you're just joining us, we are discussing part 2 of the subject infidelity, a subject that we started discussing last November, quite a while ago. And with us this afternoon, we have Pastor Ammaran Williams and Dr. Mark Braithwaite, and we are looking at this whole matter of what constitutes adultery. We just shared that adultery is more than physical, that it is something that begins in the mind. I am tempted to ask this question. because, you know, when we say adultery, we're talking about married people. But there are individuals who maybe in a relationship, they're not yet married, they're committed to each other, maybe making plans for their marriage. Do we have infidelity on that level likewise?
Well, okay, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I was just going to refer back to, you know, what an understanding of the word commitment means, and it's really a state or a quality of being dedicated to something, an engagement or an obligation that restricts us in relationship to what we have committed to. And if you are in a committed relationship, most certainly you have indicated to the individual that I am restricting myself to this relationship. I'm restricting myself to this self-imposed restriction, as it were. You didn't put a gun to my head and tell me, look, you have to be in a relationship with me or else I'll take your life. No, you made a choice to be committed. And in that context, yes, if a person steps outside of that commitment, I don't know if the term, Doc, would be adultery, but it's certainly you know, walking away from the commitment that you would have made. And it constitutes, I think, the very same thing within the context of commitment.
Pastor Williams, let's hear your input on this one.
Yeah, well, taking it one step further, and I'm so glad that you raised the question, and Dr. Braithwaite placed it in its proper perspective, and that is, even though we may not be speaking of unfaithfulness outside of the marital relation, but when you have people who are committed, the issue, the principle is the matter of commitment. But you know, the perspective that I would like to also share is the fact that before marriage, if you're in a committed relationship, whether you're engaged or you're seriously involved, what you practice there has implications for what you would do or what can happen beyond when you say I do. And so it is not just only about commitment, but if couples are serious about relationships and to have successful marriages, they need to understand that during that time prior to marriage, it's a good school, it's a good training ground to practice appropriate behaviors. And so couples, individuals must hold each other accountable, because it's not sufficient to say, well, I did not say I do, but what you practice is what you eventually would repeat.
Very, very interesting. Dr. Braithwaite, yes.
Yeah, I think, you know, just to highlight, because in the context of a committed relationship before marriage, a person would not be or not to be physically involved. And it just sort of highlights the, you know, the discussion or the point that we made earlier regarding emotional adultery, you know, and how you can allow yourself to be so connected to somebody else emotionally that it's just as though you're committing adultery at that level.
Well, you know, I want to follow up on that, but let's first go to the matter. There's something we raised the last time when we had this discussion. And I remember we spoke about it in the context of, we were asking, you know, what are some of the factors that lead people to being unfaithful? And one of the issues we raised that we didn't have time to go into a lot was this whole matter of pornography. So if we, for a moment, just look at pornography, it's a big industry. It's a multi-million-dollar industry. Many persons get into this without realizing the addictive nature of it. So let's talk about this just for a bit. Why is porn such a dangerous thing? Why is it so devastating? Why does it have that hold on us?
All right, I'm going to take first stab, and then my colleague would give all the meat in due season. Now, I want to harp back, because very often when I'm faced with a situation or an issue, you know, I look for, you know, what is the spiritual milieu that I must view this or understand this particular issue. And I have found, especially in the whole area of family life and relationships, a lot of the issues can find their bearing in what I call the creation motif. And if you look at whole creation outline, the whole principle of rest, light and darkness, the whole principle of difference, morning and evening. Those are creation motifs that speak to principles of life. And so when I look at the whole issue of pornography and you look at its background, the creation motif that comes to my mind is the whole issue of beauty, in that when God created the world, every day he said, behold, it was very good. And that was not only perfect in terms of its nature, but also it was wonderful and beautiful to behold. And so, the 6 days of creation spoke to the whole issue of beauty. But then when you look at the crowning act of creation to share that beauty, God created relationships. And so, man was created in the context of the beauty of creation, so that they can enjoy relationship. And so beauty in and of itself, it's not an end be all and end all. It is designed for that relationship. And so every day, the Bible would tell us that, man would come down in the cool of the day and they would commune in the beauty of creation. Well, plug that into the whole concept of pornography and why it is such an antithetical thing to God's creative design. In that pornography deals only with what is physically attractive, what meets the eye, and it ends there. It does not go any further, because the whole motivation for pornography is the matter of the objectification of the human body. And so pornography is dangerous. It is antithetical to anything that God desires, because it just focuses on the physical, and it destroys, or it goes against anything that is relational. And so pornography, as we alluded to in the last time we met, really tramples on relationships. And when it is done in the context of marriage, it basically moves everything in the opposite direction. And so that is my perspective from the standpoint of God's original design. Satan came in and he corrupted it in this way.
Dr. Braithwaite, what has been reported to me is that most people who are addicted to pornography, or who are involved in this thing, they tend to do it in secret. Is there a reason for that? They don't want their spouse to know. I mean, doesn't that suggest that something is wrong with it if you're hiding?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just, join with Pastor Williams in the motive and the context that he created. I think also Blackaby sort of creates a similar context in relationship to how important God, in his creation of humankind, created relationships and stood away from the objectification of the human body and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to join with that. As it relates, Doc, to your question, the reality is that an individual who finds themselves involved in pornography often will do it, in a way that they can hide, because in many ways they understand that it is not in keeping with morals and ethical values, and it is not in keeping with the context of what a committed relationship is all about. So an individual, will hide to be involved in viewing pornography. But there's another side to it, Doc, that some psychologists will speak to, and it will also speak to the fact that individuals who are involved in pornography often have low self-esteem. And it is because they understand for themselves that, this is not something that they should be doing, and it's not something that's good or sound, that they too, because of how they feel about themselves and understanding that it is wrong or is not something that they should be involved in, they seek to hide to be involved in the viewing of pornography. So from two perspectives, from the perspective of maybe somebody seeing them and being, and from the perspective of understanding that they too are struggling with their own self-issues. And so for that reason, they themselves view it as something that they should not do.
So Pastor Williams, you may want to add something to that, but I want to ask you likewise, how do I get help if I'm challenged in this area? If there's a young man or a young woman, because last time we did indicate that it affects both sexes. So if there is an individual who recognizes this thing is creating a challenge for my marriage, my family, how do I get help?
All right, excellent question. And just to just add something to what Dr. Braithwaite was saying based on the question you asked him previously, when people get to that point where they have to hide, it begins to speak to issues of addiction, and so that's what really makes the whole matter of pornography so so dangerous. It not only destroys the relationship, but it also destroys the person's sense of who they are. Because when you get to the point of being addicted to this, yes, as Dr. Braithwaite pointed out, you will hide to do it, but also you find issues of unreasonableness associated with the behavior. Unreasonableness in terms of the amount of time that you spend, so that people, they should be at work, they should be at church, or they should be somewhere doing something that is more productive, but instead they spend an inordinate amount of time to the point where their livelihood may be in jeopardy. They also spend a lot more than, well, they shouldn't at all, but excess use of money. So if it is something they have to pay for, even though they do not have the money, or they may even have money for something that is more foundational, like food or even your rent, they would choose to spend the money on those kind of things. So it is a practice that is not only frowned upon in the Bible, but it also defies logic. And so, based on the question that you've asked, how could someone get help? The first thing that needs to happen is for the individual to recognize that they have a problem. And very often in substance abuse, they say you have to hit rock bottom. I don't necessarily think you have to hit rock bottom in order to recognize that you have a problem. Because just like the prodigal son, once you recognize you have a problem, then it creates now that desire for something better. And so you now move to the second step, where you are saying, look, I need help outside of myself. So yes, in some cases I can use my own self-will, but once it gets to the point of addiction, you need help outside of yourself. And when we speak of help outside of ourselves, we are not only referring to another person, maybe like a therapist or whoever, but God himself. And, that may seem like a very trite way of saying it, but, God is the only one who really ultimately can help us to get over, whatever we are dealing with. And then, of course, you talked about the whole matter of secrecy. There has to be some measure of confession, especially to the significant, others in your life, because that kind of helps, for you to be aware that, look, it's out in the open now, so therefore I can no longer, revel in privacy. And then once that, takes place, then there are measures, whether it's a support group, whether there's professional counseling, pastoral intervention. Those are some of the the steps that one can take to reach out, for help. There are areas, there are avenues whereby we can receive help. They may not be as well defined as we would like, but what I've just stated, those are sources that one can go to in the event they are struggling with the addiction of pornography.
Now, we live in a society, and I want to just throw this in before we, maybe take a question or two from our viewers. We live in a society that we were talking about objectivizing the female's body, and we live in a society that on the one hand it goes to the extreme, with sexual immorality, and there's some persons who live just for sex and for satisfying of their craving. And on the other hand, you have those now who consider, because of that behavior, they paint with a broad brush, sex is dirty and it's bad. To what extent does this impact individuals who are married and how they relate to? Because can you have a situation where there's a married couple, but because they have the wrong concept of sex and the beauty of it as God made it, then that causes some other problems?
Right. Well, Dr. Brown.
I was just going to add, Doc, that Dr. Greene, you did mention the fact that sex is created by God and has indicated that it's a beautiful thing. The reality in terms of the understanding and the mindset of an individual who may have been raised in a context where sex and affection were simply objectified, that would cause them to have that outlook on life. And having maybe not given themselves an opportunity to be educated in regard to God's will and his desire for relationship, may continue in that vein. Also, because in terms of psychologically, because pornography is so damaging in that regard, there are also what we may consider to be other co-occurring disorders that a person may be struggling with if they come to that place of objectification. They may be struggling with issues of depression or anxiety, or sex addiction itself, or other substance use disorders. And as a result of that, they may struggle with what the true nature of relationship and sex is really all about. So I think individuals have to understand their context. As Pastor Williams indicated, they must come to a place where they recognize their shortcoming or acknowledge the difficulty that they have, so that they would not sort of project that into what God wants to be a healthy relationship.
Right, and more than that, going back to the statement I made about the creation construct there of beauty and relationship. Sex is part of beauty and relationship once it is done in the way that God has has designed. And so there is beauty there in the sexual relation, and God intended for us as husbands and wives to enjoy that beauty that he created, not just only in terms of creation, but the woman, we can celebrate her beauty, but it has to be done in the context of relationships. If we take one away from the other, we are not fulfilling God's original ideal for us as his creatures.
Well, here are a couple of questions from our viewers. This one, let's take this one first. It says here, so, in reaction to what was said just now, so you think people cheat because their partners are not meeting their sexual needs?
If I jump in quickly.
Go ahead, Dr. Braithwaite.
I think very early in this afternoon session, we indicated that, it is not just about the physical act. We indicated that people are sometimes unable to appreciate the psychological, emotional connection that is necessary for the physical act to be one that you can actually benefit from. And so far from just simply, the physical act is emotional connectedness. I think if people don't grasp that, then they will have a challenge moving forward.
Yes, and more than that, we do not create a problem to deal with a problem. So that if your sexual needs are not being met in the relationship, you look for a solution, not another problem. Because for you to say that my solution is going out there and getting involved in an extramarital affair, it's not a solution. It is another, and I would dare say, a bigger problem. And so there are other solutions, there are solutions within the context of that problem of each other not fulfilling your needs. There are appropriate ways in which to handle it, and that's a popular misconception that we have. You would hear some folks saying, "Well, okay, if you don't want to give me, I'll go somewhere else and get it." No, that's not a solution. You're just creating a bigger problem.
Interesting.
I think also one of the things is that in terms of the discussion, people often relegate the value of sexual intimacy to a place, especially among Seventh-day Adventists and Christians, where we say that, hey, if you have Jesus, you have everything, and so you don't need to pay too much attention to sexual intimacy. I mean, God created the marriage bed, and it's part of the experience of a married couple. I think it's important for individuals, if they are having challenges within the context of that arena, after you would have considered all of the other emotional realities, if there are challenges within the arena of physical intimacy, then there needs to be some measure of intervention, and a professional should be sought to do that, but not to simply relegate it and suggest that, hey, we are Christians and so we will be okay. I think that's an important observation.
There is a question that was asked in the last program and that we didn't get a chance to answer. So I'm going to jump in and ask it now. Can pornographic addiction of one's spouse constitute biblical grounds for divorce? Pastor Williams, you want to respond?
Wow. That's pretty loaded. Let me absorb that a bit. Can pornographic addiction constitute grounds for divorce? Well, I am not sure it could be stated in the legal document, number one, but I know we're not speaking to that. But it's wow. I don't think the issue so much is the matter of, okay, because we did say that you can commit adultery without being physical. But one of the issues in adultery, that is a physical aspect where the person, goes out. There is that, there's a social stigma attached to it. There's a physical desecration, if you want to put it that way, that is attached. And so, those two things kind of put it in a different realm. And so my first course of action for pornographic addiction is not to run to the biblical grounds for divorce, but to seek intervention and seek to bring the relationship, back into healing, because the physical aspect of going out of the marriage, the coming together physically with someone else, it places the situation in a different realm. And so I would not go to that extent by advocating for pornography to be grounds for divorce, but more so it is a grounds for you to seek for healing and restoration. I think that should be the first step. And I don't want to sound, and maybe that's why I don't want to sound as if I'm walking around the situation. But even in the area of adultery, there should be the first action should not be the divorce court, but because the Bible says, because of the hardness of our heart, that it was granted on the grounds of adultery. And so I look more to restoration and healing. And so I see this more from that standpoint, rather than going into that just the legal argument because of pornography.
Dr. Braithwaite, there is another question here that is very interesting. And I know we can go on some more on these, but we have a number of questions, and I really do want to get to the matter of a fear proof in your marriage, unless we will have to leave that for part 3. It's shaping up. But this question is very interesting. A couple once asked me, the person says, where do you get ideas on how to have sex, if not from porn, if they as a couple agree with what's the problem? So here's an individual who will say, listen, my wife agrees and I agree, and we're going to use pornographic material to get our ideas from. What's right or wrong or dangerous about it? Dr. Braithwaite.
Well, from the very first, from earlier in our discussion, we did indicate that pornography has significant negative effects on relationships. All right. The WHO statement from Dawn Dawkins says that for many pornography consumers, repeated exposure and frequent use, and just use, is related to addiction. It can lead to harm such as, pornographic-induced erectile dysfunctions. It leads to divorce or failed relationships, and sometimes sexual aggressiveness and violent behaviors. So we understand that the use of porn itself, or pornography itself, it has significant negative impacts. And these studies are not done by the church; they're just done by, the world at large. The impact of pornography is significant. Why would you put relationship at risk in relation to what God's ideal is, taking your relationship down what we may consider to be an immoral road in relationship to your marriage? I think that it's really important for persons to understand that pornography is it's far removed from God's ideal. It's action and injection, I would suggest, by the devil himself, destroy relationships, and we would not want to in any way, shape, or form put your relationship in risk at all.
Before Pastor Williams jumps in, as I read the question, it occurred to me that Eve did talk to Adam about eating the fruit, so they agreed. But agreeing on something doesn't necessarily make it right. Pastor Williams.
All right. Excellent, excellent. So I'm glad you stated that. So let me just put my next spin on this. I am sensing that the question is kind of more trying to morph the whole issue of sex education and pornography. And we have to make that distinction, because I know, and I can share this, I don't think I have my wife's permission, but when we were quoting, one of the books that we read was on the whole issue of sexuality. And as I can remember in that text, as part of our premarital education was the whole matter of positions and so on, that couples, when they're married, that they can use. It's part of the whole educative process. I think the book was called Human Sexuality. Pornography, on the other hand, is not designed for sex education. It is a perversion. It is, as we've been stating, the objectification of the human form. It is an exploitative activity. And so we need to make the distinction. So engaging in pornography as part of your, whatever you want to call it, before sex is not appropriate. But if in the context of where you're looking to enhance your sexual relationship, there are legitimate ways and means for that sex education without bringing in that destructive element in pornography. So, I've heard this argument, and it's a very, very weak argument to say, well, it enhances. No, pornography does not have any redemptive or beneficial qualities.
I'm glad you touched on the matter of the sex education, because the question, where do we get information on sex? It suggests that there are some persons still who do not understand the value of premarital counseling. And when we talk about premarital counseling, when Dr. Braithwaite and I share on marriage encounters so often, we cannot overemphasize the benefits, the value of preparing adequately for marriage. And this matter of individuals just wanting to get married without any preparation is really sad. But if you do the proper premarital preparation, you would get information on a host of things, sexuality and that kind of thing. Yes, Dr. Braithwaite, you were jumping in to make a point.
I was so happy that Pastor Williams raised that issue of, a person sometimes attempting to morph pornography with sex education. And he kind of touched the point, but I just wanted to highlight it, that depending on what you read, and in some quarters, some persons would suggest that, utilizing pornography can be healthy. And so I just wanted to, debunk that myth in context of the discussion that we're having, because as Pastor indicated, there's really no redemptive, no value in the world of business. There's no capital value to the use of pornography at any level. What it actually does is it weakens your resolve and also weakens your relationship, and causes you to have, causes an individual to have, unhealthy thoughts towards their partner. So definitely, just to make that point, it is not and ought not to be used in any way, shape, or form as a form of education.
I mean, at the end of the day, marriage is supposed to be, the act of sex is supposed to be between two persons, between a husband and a wife. One of the things that pornography does, it encourages this transference, so that a man can be in bed with his wife, but he has somebody else in mind. And that's pretty dangerous, because now, we spoke about objectivizing the partner, but then sex just becomes a matter of pleasure and nothing more, which of course is going to eventually lead to challenges of of how you value your spouse and what level of appreciation and respect you give for your spouse.
Elder, I know I'm not trying to get a part 3 here, but this is such an important this, because if it's part 3, then you have to hire me on your staff. But this is critical, and I think we will be doing ourselves somewhat of a disservice if we do not, because there are many, and we haven't gone into the whole aspect of the different kinds of pornography. But the one that I want to focus on, that some, especially young people, may be listening or maybe viewing and not realize that this is all part of the same whole, is the whole phenomenon with the advent of the smartphone and with these instant communication devices. The issue of sexting, sexting. And you know, that is where individuals, and I don't want to limit it to just, you know, young people, but even adults, older folk engage in this. And sexting is defined as sharing of sexually explicit images and videos through the internet, using especially the smartphone. And so there may be some who are engaging in this, and there's a whole lot of statistics on this that is telling us it's not just a burgeoning problem, but it has exploded to the point where they're saying 1 in 7 teenagers engage in this behavior. 1 in 7. Then 1 in 4 say, or they report having received these explicit, you know, images of the sex organs of another individual. They also point out, the statistics tell us that males are the main individuals who are requesting these images. And then, of course, females are the majority. They're in the majority of, you know, of sending. And so I want to kind of bring this to the fore, and I hope it doesn't take us in another you know, direction. But you know, we need to understand that apart from the fact that, you know, people are looking at images of others, but you have now where people are sending images of themselves and certain body parts and certain activities to others. Once it is sexually explicit, it comes and it goes from one person to the next who is not authorized to, you know, to see it. It falls within that, you know, that category. And so I felt that it was important for me to just, you know, lay this here in the context of what we are speaking of.
You know, Pastor Williams, the reality is we really already on part 3 time. Your criteria was that you have to be part of staff. Well, I consider that since you are at the Caribbean Union, and that's already so. So
speak to my president. Yes.
Now yes, Dr. Braithwaite.
Yeah, I really wanted to, because, you know, Pastor Williams raised such an important point in relation to the whole context of sexting. And, you know, it speaks to the notion of addiction as well, because people, you know, based on what we understand about the brain and how it works, you know, the use of the dopamines, and endorphins, and how the brain sort of relates to rewards, visual, particularly for men. You know, it leads down the road of addictions that cause young people not even to be able to appreciate and understand the damage that they're doing to themselves while they engage in this behavior. And some people just think, it's fun, it's nice, I feel good about it, but not understanding how this affects their brain, because pornography use is harmful to the brain, or the viewing of explicit sexual materials regularly is harmful to the brain. And there are 39, I believe it's 39 neurological studies consistent with over 280 internet addiction brain studies supporting the premise, and I'm just sharing this, that internet pornography use and the use of explicit images can cause addiction-related brain changes. And that is something that I don't think a lot of people can actually appreciate. But people lose interest in the study of the Word of God, lose interest in things that are important, have memory issues and all kinds of other dynamics taking place as a result of the use of pornography and the use of continued sexually explicit images, and feel that it's just okay and it's not going to affect me, but it actually has huge impact on the brain.
Certainly does. Now, the matter of affair-proofing the marriage, because what we really want to get to is how do we avoid infidelity? We only have 4 minutes, so we will definitely have to come back, but let's begin that discussion. The matter of affair-proofing your marriage, we want our viewers to get this sense. I came across an article on the artofmanliness.com, and they spoke about 14 ways to affair-proof your marriage. They have them in categories, and the first category is this matter of making your marriage a priority. We can stay for the rest of the afternoon talking about why this person committed adultery, why the other person committed adultery. But can we spend the rest of the time looking at what can we do to affair-proof our relationship so that we don't end in this painful state of knowing that my spouse committed adultery. So let's just speak to the issue of making one's marriage a priority. How do we go about doing that?
Well, the first, if I may just jump in, the first thing we've been talking about, the whole issue of pornography and so on. And so affair-proofing your marriage, because the statistics indicate that individuals who engage in the use of watching pornography, they are more inclined to step out of the relationship. So they're not only having their danger highlighted in terms of engaging in it, but they would be, it's a likely pathway to infidelity. And so the advice is pretty straightforward. Stop the porn. That is a practice that you must stop. If you're addicted to it, seek help, because you have to restore the sanctity of not just your marriage, but your the way that you think, and to get back into God's creative design. That is, you see beauty, it must be tied to that exclusive relationship. Anything else outside of that is it's not gold. It may glitter, but it's not beauty.
On the last program we had, somebody had asked a question, and we didn't really get time to it, but in this context, they were saying, listen, you have these intense emotions, but your spouse seems not to be willing to relocate. So you are highly sexually motivated, and your spouse seems not to. So the person is saying, I don't want to go down the pornography road. I don't want to be unfaithful, but I am not satisfied. What do I do?
All right. Well, I think to that, and I'm sensitive to the time, the whole matter of, if you have your spouse who is not too keen on getting, involved in the way that they should. And, the counsel is very clear, and we talk about affair proof in your marriage. And that is, once you recognize and you have that need for closer relationship with your wife, is to initiate affection. And very often, unfortunately, when people talk about being affectionate, it is only in the context of the sex act. And what all the studies show is that affection has a value in and of itself, and it doesn't have to be with both of you lying in bed. It could be as simple as sending a text of appreciation. It's about just engaging them in conversation about, not about the bills, not about things, but about how are you feeling. Speak at the emotional level. It is about simple thing, you're going out, or you in the hold hands and just enjoy each other and be affectionate as an end in itself. So those are things that you can do, and once that happens, it really provides that incentive or that momentum to to go further in terms of being affectionate.
In addition, Doc, maybe the people may ask themselves the question, why is my sex drive as high as it is? Because I think we shared earlier also that oftentimes persons who may have been involved in pornography, because of the images that they would have, been exposed to, they now want to go ahead and try the thing. And that can create the kind of a dissonance in the relationship, or the dissonance or the difference in terms of the sex drives between the two individuals. For a person who may come up quite protected, not very exposed, as opposed to the person who may have been extremely exposed to all types of different literature, that create, and so that type of discussion is very important. And you may need to get some professional assistance in relationship to how you can bring this into harmony, or into better harmony.
Thank you so much. Our time has expired. I would like to say that, of course, the matter of affair proof in your marriage, there's a whole lot more that we need to talk to and address on those issues. So sometime during the month of March, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to come back, and we're going to try to finish that. I'll have to check the March schedule to make sure that I can fit it in there. In the meantime, I would like to say to our viewers that next week's program promises to be very, very interesting. We are going to be looking at this matter of surviving and thriving after a divorce. We want to be very practical, and so we have individuals who have been through a divorce who will be on the program with us. We're going to address the issues related to, and it's just going to be a tremendous program. 3 p.m. next week. We will not be able to go over our 4 o'clock time. Of course, we have another very big program tomorrow next Sabbath afternoon, beginning at 4. So we are asking you to sign on early for that very important subject next week on Let's Talk, Surviving and Thriving After a Divorce. Well, thanks to you both, Pastor Williams, Dr. Braithwaite. Dr. Braithwaite, you were making a comment.
I just want to share that brief resource. I'm just going to put it up on the screen real quick for those who may be struggling with pornography.
That's right.
Yes. Write down it is at family.adventist.org, family.adventist.org. You scroll right down to the bottom of the page, and you're going to see pornography addiction resources, as I'm showing it here. And you just click on that tab, and it will carry you to New Freedom to Love, Truth About Love and Porn. And then you click on Visit New Freedom to Love. And the resources are right there very quickly. My computer's running a little slow, the internet is a little slow. But you will see these resources here. Oh, come on. Okay, here we go. All right. And so these resources are available for your assistance in that journey, testimonials, seminars, and things that you can just utilize And these are the unplugged with individuals who are just sharing information about how you can get through this challenge. So it is found, the original site, as I mentioned, family.adventist.org. Scroll down to the bottom and you will get to this tab, Pornography Addiction Resources. Okay, so I just wanted to share that we're praying for persons who are struggling in this arena.
Thank you so much, Dr. Braithwaite. And I did forget that you wanted to share that resource, but I'm glad you jumped in and did that because that's very important for individuals who are struggling. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you both again, gentlemen, for sharing with us this afternoon. We wish you God's blessings. We wish all of our viewers a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you next Sabbath afternoon when we have another very exciting episode of Let's Talk. God bless you.